Welcome. My name is Jing Chung, Director of the Council of Ethnic Organizations and a proud UH student. We're excited to have you here today to join us to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have a wonderful program scheduled today, and we hope you enjoy what we have in store. After the program, we welcome you to join us for light refreshments right after the program, I'm sorry. I would now like to introduce our immediate past chair of the University of Houston System Board of Regents, Mr. Jarvis V. Hollingsworth.
Thank you and good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you again this year to celebrate this momentous occasion with my Cougar family. It's a bit with mixed emotions this year. I think I've been with you for the last 5 years for this celebration, and with this being my last year on the Board of Regents, this will be my last opportunity to share this occasion with you. I was 6 years old when Dr. King was cut down by an assassin's bullet. I was really too young, obviously, to really appreciate what happened. And it'd be a few years before I really understood what that day meant, what our nation lost on that day in Memphis, Tennessee. But as the years went by through high school and then through college, I began to comprehend, as I learned more about Dr. King and the things that he did, and really, as many of you are doing right now, started my own personal journey as it relates to embracing the teachings of Dr. King that each of us know so well. But it helped me start to understand my place in the world, how I fit in, how some thought I fit in, how some thought I didn't. But in addition to that, some of the other lessons I began to learn, the lessons of what it meant to be philanthropic, what it meant to volunteer, what public service really meant. As we know, those were also some of the overarching themes of Dr. King's life, in addition to some of the social lessons that we learned. Of course, last week, our nation, by the hundreds of thousands, honored Dr. King's memory by participating in a day of service. My own firm spent the day at the food bank, and it's my understanding that many of you participated in the University of Houston's day of service. But here in Houston, of course, young and old alike, from every race, ethnicity imaginable, delivered meals, refurbished community centers, collected food, and did just about anything we could in honor of Dr. King on behalf of those who are in need. Again, 3 days ago, many of you, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and your families joined together to bring food to the hungry, comfort to the old, and love and hope to those most in need. Dr. King's speeches are often quoted, and I'd like to share a couple of my favorites with you, as I think that they're emblematic of the world and then the society that Dr. King envisioned. The first being, not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great, because greatness is determined by service. And of course, the second, as we've all heard much lately, is life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? It may be a question that seems a little foreign to many of you at your age, but life really is about what we can do to assist others. So for now, I want to encourage each of you to look around your neighborhoods, your offices, your circle of friends, and ask yourselves, how can I be of service? What can I do for others? In the spirit of the day and in the personal satisfaction that comes from doing good, I ask all of you to double your efforts and help make ours a more peaceful, just, and educated society. Thank you for having me with you this morning.
I would now like to introduce Dr. Alwyn Lee, Vice President for Community Relations and Institutional Access, who will provide us with a moment of reflection of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Good morning. It's an honor to have this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. First, let me convey the regrets of our amazing Chancellor, Dr. Couture, who could not be with us this morning because she's in Austin, interacting with the legislature and fighting for the resources we'll need to continue our upward trajectory. But for that, she would have been here to provide greetings as she has done for each year in my memory. Before leaving, however, she did take time out on MLK Community Service Day this past Saturday to visit several community sites. You might also be interested in knowing that Dr. Couture has supported an effort directed by the university called All Kids Alliance that hopes to elevate the educational outcomes in the East End, elevate the outcomes for mostly Hispanic students in that area. And she's also established a partnership with Third Ward Community with the same goal of helping make improvements there as well. So let's give the Chancellor a round of applause for leading by example, even though she's not here. On to my reflections. The path to this day actually began about a year ago when I had the pleasure of experiencing Sister Outsider at a conference I attended in California. I knew then I had to suggest to our committee that Sister Outsider be part of our celebration. Luckily, the committee agreed, and here we are. You will get to judge for yourself as Sister Outsider communicates the universal desire of those who on the outside to be viewed for who they are, viewed as true equals, as MLK would say, by the content of their character. You will also have the opportunity to attend a workshop led by Sister Outsider at 3 p.m. in the Space City Room, room 214 in the Student Center today. The MLK holiday was established in January 1986 by President Reagan when he signed a proclamation making the third Monday of January a holiday to honor Dr. King's birthday. It was not celebrated by all the states until the year 2000. Around the country, it is celebrated by parades. Of course, things are bigger in Texas, so we had two. Oratory and essay contests, festivals, art exhibits, such as the current one at the Menil Museum in Houston, and days of service. Today, however, this celebration will be done with poetry. This celebration, and I hope all the celebrations of MLK, will have three things in common. First, we want to make sure that you, the audience, learn something. Second, we want you to feel something, because emotion is very much a part of the historic civil rights struggle, very much a part of the struggle for change, and very much a part of what will motivate future action. And finally, the third thing, we hope you will be inspired to learn more, inspired to think critically, and inspired to act in ways that make the world a better place, one with less poverty, less violence, and certainly one that is more inclusive. The history of MLK, Dr. King, is well known, but can be summarized very quickly. Son of Atlanta pastor, he was ordained precociously as an assistant pastor at the age of 18. After finishing seminary school, he returned back to the South. He went to school in Boston. In 1955, at the age of 26, he was elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. That association spearheaded a boycott to protest the law that required blacks to sit in the back of the city buses. For over a year, 50,000 black people walked and carpooled to their jobs, school, and church. Despite death threats and a bomb thrown on his porch, Dr. King persisted, and the buses were desegregated. In 1957, Dr. King organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and in 1959, he traveled to India to deepen his understanding of Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence as a method of social change. Upon his return, he threw himself into helping to coordinate interstate freedom rides. This is where college students and others would travel on buses to the South to try and use public accommodations reserved just for whites to dramatize the inequity and the segregation. While the rioters were often beaten, the riots continued. In Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most segregated cities in the South, rioters and their supporters were subjected to water hoses and vicious dogs. There, Dr. King was thrown in jail, from which he wrote his famous letter from a Birmingham jail responding to those who questioned his tactics and his impatience. He argued that unjust law, those out of harmony with moral law or the law of God, could be disobeyed through acts of nonviolent disobedience. We must never forget, he said, that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal. And as for impatience, he observed that the weight that has rung in his ears for years always seems to mean never for black people. Justice too long delayed is justice denied, he said. In August 1963, he gave his famous I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom that was organized by his colleague Bayard Rustin, who just happened to be a member of the LGBT community. 250,000 people attended the event. People of all ethnicities and creeds joined him that day and thereafter in the continued struggle for equal rights. Some endured brutality, and sadly, some have been killed. Though a high price was paid, on July 2nd, 1964, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was signed into law by President Johnson with Dr. King watching over his shoulder. That law gave blacks the right to eat in restaurants and go to hotels. It also provided new protections against job discrimination. From there, the movement began to push to secure federal law enforcing the voting rights being denied blacks throughout the South. The current movie, Silver, depicts this struggle quite well, and I encourage you to see it. To dramatize the claim, Dr. King and his supporters vowed to march from Selma, Alabama, to the state capitol in Montgomery. The first two times they tried, they were met with brutal resistance from the Alabama police and state troopers as they tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. On the third try, under federal protection, 25,000 people joined Dr. King in crossing the bridge in late March 1965. That night, a white Italian marcher was shot, Miss Viola Luiso, as she drove other marchers home. Other marchers had been beaten to death before that Triumph March as well. Though the price was high, in August 1965, the Voting Rights Act with real enforcement provisions was signed into law by President Johnson. In 1968, while in Memphis preparing to lead striking black sanitation workers who were fighting for better wages, Dr. King was struck down by assassin's bullet. He was just 39 years old. Dr. King was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, and in 2011, a 30-foot granite statue was erected in Washington near the Lincoln Memorial. It honors his civil rights achievements and the principles for which it stood. His wife said that Dr. King fought against the triple threats of racism, war, and poverty. He did so through nonviolent direct action and love. Now, in addition to service, his most fervent concern was for justice, such as economic justice. If he were here today, no doubt he would be talking about income inequality and the wealth gap between minorities and whites that has continued to increase in the midst of the economic recovery. According to a Pew Research report in 2013, the median net worth of white households was $141,900, Hispanic households $13,700, and black households $11,000. If he were today, he would also say something about justice and the unequal treatment and policing and the criminal justice system. If he were today, no doubt he would be talking about Ferguson, Missouri, and the death of Mike Brown. He would also be talking about Staten Island and the death of Eric Garner. And most certainly he would talk about Cleveland, Ohio, and the death of the 12-year-old kid, Tamir Rice. He would decry the tragic death of so many unarmed black men, and he would decry with equal vigor the senseless killings of New York police officers Ramos and Liu by a psychotic individual angered by the deaths of the unarmed black men. Thousands across the country and hundreds in Houston, some here at this university, have demonstrated to show their concern. There have been demonstrations, marches, die-ins, and T-shirts with expressions such as "I can't breathe" and Don't shoot me. This has been followed by workshops, forums, numerous columns suggesting action, and proposed legislation calling for body cameras for police, better police training, independent prosecutors, civilian review boards, modification of grand jury procedures, and the list goes on. MLK, Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He has argued that a person interested in justice must endeavor to stop it, not just for the sake of his immediate community, but for the good of all mankind in all our wonderful diversity. There are real challenges here where the lines of race, gender, due process, security, equal protection intersect, and we as teachers, students, and citizens must face. These are not just someone else's issues. These are American issues. These are our issues. If we are to make real the nation's promise of freedom, democracy, and opportunity for all. As President Barack Obama said at the October 2011 dedication of the Martin Luther King statue, our work is not done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And now for our future presentation, the University of Houston is proud to welcome Sister Outside Poetry. Sister Outside Poetry is an award-winning duo representing two of the top 3 female slam poets in the world, Dominique Christina and Denise Froman. Their tour marks the first time that 2 Women of the World Poetry Slam Championships have paired up. They have appeared on 6 National Poetry Slam final stages and have 6 championships collectively. Inspired by the life and work of Audre Lorde, they write and perform their otherness into the center and use spoken word as a tool for social change. Dominique Christina is a writer, performer, educator, and activist. She holds 5 national titles in the 3 years she has been competing in the slam, including the 2014 and 2012 Women of the World Slam Championship and 2011 National Poetry Slam Champion. She is the only person to have won 2 Women of the World Poetry Championships. Her first book of the poetry, The Bones, The Breaking, and The Bomb, is available now. Denise Froman is an award-winning poet, lyricist, and educator. She is the 2013 Woman of the World Poetry Slam Champion and 2014 Canto Mundo Fellow, 2012 Leeway Transformation Award recipient, and 2013 Hispanic Choice Award winner. Her debut album, Feels Like Home, is available now. So please give a warm UH welcome to Sister Outsider Poetry.
How are you? Good. Thanks for having us. We're probably going to jump right in. This first poem is the marriage of 2 pre-existing poems for Denise and I individually. Both poems were seeking to have wider conversations about the often difficult realities that students negotiate in traditional model classrooms in Philadelphia school system and Denver public school systems, respectively. This poem is called No Child Left Behind. It is a conversation about a great many things, to include the ways in which pedagogy sometimes does not insist enough on cultural competency. It's what happens when you languish in classrooms that have curriculum that do not reflect in any way who you are or who you have been. And it's also a conversation, a small conversation, about the school to prison pipeline. So we shoved a whole lot in this 3-minute poem. This poem is No Child Left Behind.
No child left behind. At entrance of a West Philadelphia high school, officer with gun perched on each waist asked me if I have any weapons. I hold up my book, but he doesn't find that funny. tells me to empty pockets, walk through metal detector, 8:03 a.m. I wait for 2 students to pass through first already. I wonder what they have learned. See, I heard the newly built prison a few miles away bought their test scores as wallpaper. But we say, no child left behind.
Because it's a slogan for the slick, who co-opt a principle as old as the pyramids and then draft it onto t-shirts. You know, sell your grandmama's dedication back to you for $14.99. Stand on political platforms and speak that mess into megaphones to convince you that you have not heard it before, like your mama did not work 3 jobs and average 2 hours of sleep a night so you would not be left behind, like your daddy didn't stop drinking, teach you how to drive, show you how to fight, gave you lunch money when he didn't have it to give so you would not be left behind. No child left behind is a bumper sticker,
a caption,
an empty slogan with no room for imagination.
So I asked them if they have dreams. 11 students raised their hands barely above their shoulders, as if they were sitting in history class unsure of the right answer. One student in the first row named Luciano was waiting for me to tell him what page to turn to. Another student in the 8th row was trying to decide if this is a trick question. There's no right answer, I say, but they are far too comfortable with the right to remain silent.
See, some of us hunkered down in dimly lit classrooms and then memorized that same old mess about Lincoln.
Oh, yeah?
Freeing slaves
Did
with
he?
a
Did he?
magical
Did he now?
document called an Emancipation Proclamation. All right. When you feed us the rotten fruit of untold stories, don't penalize us when we'd rather be gangsters than listen to another nifty little tale about George Washington Carver and his innovation with that peanut. See, there's nothing threatening about the etymology of Jiffy, but if you talk to us about Haiti, we might remember the fire in our bellies.
I'm escorted to an auditorium where there are 130 Black and Latino students. We talk about hip-hop. They think poetry is what old white people do. I tell them my favorite poem is Miss Fat Booty because I like the storytelling. They giggle as if they're still kids.
Because kids these days tie poetry to a chair and then they torture it with bad hip-hop. They flog and they beat it. They trick and BET it. Deny it food, water, and life. Figure out how to booty shake to it.
Hire a video vixen for it.
Get Lil Jon to remix it. Chop and then screw it. No child left behind. Even when the culture is sick, we don't do it.
The first time I read a book by a Latina author was in college. The wind in my chest stood up. It had been 18 long years of textbooks filled with everything but me. For the first time, my body knew a world that could hold it. See, the quickest way to silence a mouth is to treat it as if none had come before.
There are thousands of unreported lynchings that happen in American classrooms each year. The victims are between the ages of 5 and 19. They are black and brown and gay and poor and different and other and not enough and too much. Round pegs in square classrooms. Children suffering for not being who we want them to be, for having voices too loud,
accents too thick,
pockets too thin for classrooms to honor us just as we are.
We doing all right? We doing all right? All right, cool. This next poem is called Accents. It's really my way to celebrate my mom, who's Puerto Rican and has a very thick accent. And so when I was growing up, a lot of times in public spaces in particular, I, as her like pseudo-translator, would notice how people would talk down to her and assume that she's not intelligent, capable, or even valuable in some cases because of the way she speaks. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is Accents. My mom holds her accent like a shotgun with 2 good hands. Her tongue all brass-knuckled, slipping in between her lips. Her hips are all laughter and wind clap. She speaks a sancocho of Spanish and English pushing up and against one another in rapid fire. Mira, there is no telling my mama to be quiet. My mama don't know quiet. Her voice is one size better fit all. And you best not tell her to hush. She waited too many years for her voice to arrive to be told it needed housekeeping. See, English sits in her mouth remixed. So strawberry becomes a strawberry. And cookie becomes a cookie. And kitchen, keychain, and chicken all sound the same. My mama doesn't say yes. She says, aha. And suddenly the sky in her mouth becomes a Hector Lavoe song. Her tongue can't lay itself down flat enough for the English language. It got too much hip, too much bone, too much conga, too much cuatro to two-step. Got too many piano keys in between her teeth. It got too much clave, too much hand clap. Got too much salsa to sit still. It's be an anxious child wanting to make Play-Doh out of concrete. English be too neat for her, kind of wonderful. Her words spill in conversation between women whose hands are all they got. Sometimes our hands are all we got. And accents that remind us that we are still bomba, still plena. You say huepa, and a stranger becomes your hermano. You say dale, and a crowd becomes a family reunion. My mother's tongue is a telegram from her mother, decorated with the coquis of El Campo. So even when her lips can barely stretch themselves around English, her accent is a stubborn compass, always pointing her towards home.
I keep checking on my 6-year-old who's eating chips on the side of the stage. Got to make sure he ain't getting in another. Okay. The poems you'll hear from me today are out of order chronologically. However, the order in which you're hearing from me is sort of the natural progression of things in terms of how I carried these stories. You know, we've all inherited the stories of the people who preceded us, right? I mean, for me, history, that's all history is this wild inheritance of stories that are supposed to suggest to us where we have been and where we can go and can't go. I wrote this a long time ago. This is for Coretta Scott King. There was nothing symbolic about Martin Luther King being shot in the neck. No metaphor could capture the sting a community felt when yet another assassination tore at the resolve of folks who lived in their heads and dreamed of someday, and one day, a bullet can punctuate a movement, but I don't think about that day. Not even when my children come marching with images of the man, embellished in crayon and the kind of exuberance that only youthfulness and naivete can sustain. They want to tell me about the dream he had and the evil in the world that snatched it. They run it all down for me, wide-eyed and mortified at how helpless they feel in these conversations with history, where great men who dared to jut out were struck down, and the gross improprieties of it all, and the incredible immorality of it all, and the needlessness and senselessness of it all. Can't believe how damned ungodly we were. They need me to do something about it. Wrestle the past down to fairy tales and a fix, and they all lived happily ever after at the end. But I don't think about that day. Or the man who steadied his hand, shouldered his rifle, and put Martin in his scope. The man who woke up that morning and ate his eggs and drank his coffee with a mission statement curdling in his veins. The man who knew he would take a life that day, a big life, a bigger than can be believed life, because all life is bigger than can be believed, and how he probably showered in silence, feeling powerful and intentional, and whoever loved him probably kissed his cheek and said some casual, not at all epic thing as he was leaving, like, "Don't forget to pick up some milk on your way out," and how he nodded and knew he would obligate history to remember him, and how calculating he was and certain he was, steeped in his own vast set of politics and platforms. He set his jaw against the hubris of history and squeezed, but I don't think about that day, not that one or the one that preceded it, when Coretta must have felt something that caught in her back and heavied her steps and pulled her lip down. She must have gazed as she did every morning at the man she married and been struck dumb by how unlucky they were to be talking out loud about freedom. And what happened when folks start believing in the women who hung the hopes they had for an entire generation on the sermons of a man she fell in love with because he made her laugh. not the tattered Bible earmarked and underlined under his arm, or the seismic impact of the words he spoke, or the swell of folk who gathered outside churches and on corners to hear him talk of parables and possibilities, but because he made her laugh. A deep and rolling laugh that moved her to girlishness and pinked her mouth with smiling. I don't think about that day or the one after it, when his wife had locusts in her belly and could see neither promised land nor mountaintop around her children's wailing, their small hands pulling at her skirt, needing her to fix it, to tell God he made a mistake, that daddies were supposed to be forever, that however inevitable the newsreels reported it, bleeding out and leaving was never an option, and the gnashing of baby teeth and the thundercrack of a nation's grief when all Coretta wanted was to remember what laughing felt like when Martin made her do it, and what dreaming felt like when Martin made her do it, and what faith felt like, and hope felt like, and the moments that were replete with parables and possibilities, and she still believed she could affix, and they all lived happily ever after at the end.
You still here? Yes, very much so. Awesome. This poem is, I guess, my way to honor the legacy and the life's work of Muhammad Ali. For me, I draw so much inspiration from him because, to me, he represents what it means to have integrity when it's inconvenient, when you have something to risk, when you have something to lose. And I think that's the true mark of a person, when you do the right thing anyway. And I could go on and on about all the examples in my head, but you know, we have to think about the time that he existed in during the civil rights movement, when he was in the boxing ring, at the Olympics, fighting for his country, knowing that his country wasn't fighting for him, or when he was asked to go to the Vietnam War and he said he wasn't gonna go fight a war out there when there's a war here called Jim Crow that this country's unwilling to reckon with and deal with. So there are so many moments in his life that I think he kind of calls that into the room of having integrity, even when it's difficult. And so this is for him. That's my voice, isn't it? That's never happened to me before. I feel like I have to acknowledge it. Me back to myself. Okay, all right. Sorry. You see this slick mouth, all this saliva I don't swallow, how my tongue hang loose and out the window. I was born Cassius Clay, but it made everything smell bad. You ever finally get something you never had, but has always been yours? Muhammad Ali, the most dangerous thing I've ever owned. The kind of name that gives a man back his pulse in the segregated South, every syllable a winning ticket, a way to take residence in my bones. You ever shake loose the dust and realize all this time you were waiting to be born? You ever step so deep inside yourself you leave the door cracked open just enough to let your own freedom crawl back in? Do you know what freedom is? It's when you get so lost you don't want to come back home. When your body's fluent and don't listen to nobody but the wind. When you pull yourself so far down, you ain't got a choice but to say your name the way a grandfather taught you. They surprised because I brag about my pretty. Say it don't sound right. Say my mouth fit too many words in it and don't ask for permission. Say my neck too loose. Call it a church, but say can't nobody holy live there. Say I'm funny. Well, I say you funny looking. I say you know where all the ghosts live. Say you like Cassius Clay more than Muhammad Ali. Say I'm so delicious it makes white folks call me sir. Became a boxer when they stole my bike. Became a poet when they stole my name. Every day is 15 rounds with an opponent you can't always see. Could have been a white flag. Decided to be a bomb. Decided to detonate inside everything that said I wasn't worth being written down. Decided to rumble, young man, rumble. Say my mouth caused too much trouble. I say silence requires too much maintenance. Might wake up one day with a torch in your hand and a reason for living. Might be a dream deferred wanting answers. Might learn what to call yourself by learning what not to call yourself. Might save the world by being somebody's problem. Might wake up with a beehive in your chest and realize all the honey was trapped inside. You're just waiting to jump out in the ring. This ain't activism, no. This is survival. This is making an ocean and a way. This is starting enough wildfires that you make Jim Crow say your name. When I fought Floyd Patterson, he'd only call me Cassius Clay. Then I knew I had to whoop him until he said my name. So what's my name? I'm Jack Johnson, back with a prettier smile and a bigger vocabulary. What's my name? Ask Vietnam, ask Uncle Sam, ask Sonny Liston. What's my name? One day they'll call me Amiri Baraka, Angela Davis, Tupac Shakur, Malcolm X. Say it, say it. Said, I'm gonna hit you so hard, God gonna look at you and say, that ain't mine. I'm bad and I'm pretty. But they say be humble, as in know your place. As in, be grateful you made it. As in, we usually don't let people like you get this far. So damn right, I'm the greatest and can't possibly be beat. Got a name so big everyone had to reckon with the fear of me knowing myself. I built a world that would chant Ali, Ali. Let it ring in your ear. And if we're lucky, we'll start a fire.
Y'all all right? Okay. So this next poem for me, I told you it was going to be out of order chronologically. This next poem is about the Birmingham church bombing. 16th Street Baptist Church, September 1963. 16th Street Baptist Church was a meeting place. I'm probably preaching to the choir. You probably already know this. But because it was a meeting place, and because it was where we strategized, where we talked about boycotts and marches and sit-ins, and for how long, it became a symbol that some wanted to destroy, to truncate the movement, and create enough fear and shock and awe, right? The spectacle of horror kind of thing, which we still see. It's a sad tradition that we've inherited, the spectacle of horror. Mike Brown's body in the street for 4.5 hours is the spectacle of horror. In this situation, sticks of dynamite were planted under the steps of the church, the front steps. It's a huge church. And that dynamite detonated right as Sunday school was underway. And there were 26 young people in Sunday school that day. And all of them were maimed, lost limbs, lost their minds, lost their will, and 4 little girls died that day. My mother told me that story when I was very young, and I couldn't shake it, you know. I didn't hold that story the way I held other stories that she told me. It felt different to me. And maybe it was selfish. Maybe it was because it was 4 little girls that looked a little something like me that were blown apart in church. Maybe it was because as many horror stories as I'd heard, because my family was had big roles that they played in the civil rights movement. My aunt desegregated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. But I was haunted by the Birmingham bombing, you know, because I couldn't understand what in the world, what platform would ever legitimize blowing up little girls in church. I couldn't get with that. But I was an adult. It was 2 years ago when I was finally able to write about it, and I'm really glad I did, because I think I really just needed a way to grieve for them appropriately and honor them appropriately. So this is Birmingham Sunday, and it's for the 4 little girls who died. I don't know what came down first. A church ain't made for falling in on itself. You don't build them prepared for destruction. You build them thinking about that praise shout, the hand clap, the open-mouthed communion. How many choir members can fit in the pulpit, the pancake breakfast you gonna have in the basement, and the stained glass Jesus? Even in Birmingham, Alabama. 1963, when you had to account for dynamite. For waterlogged protest marchers blown clean off their feet, they fell like blood-torn right angles to foaming at the mouth police dogs, billy clubs, batons. If you were a colored girl in Birmingham, you knew how to duck, how to shrink, how to be a misspelled word, squelched down to sugar-softened press and curl perkiness. Their silence was so loud. Their teeth a locked gate. Their mouths held annual sit-ins for their flame-red throats. The sizzle and spill of every unsaid thing. And it's hard to be so still with all that starshine and playground shimmy in the stretch of our bones. But on Sundays, we get in there right. The mornings roll out in hotcakes and black coffee. Daddy is a baritone down the hall singing hymns. Mama is fixing his tie, then yelling about, "Girl, get in here and eat before this food gets cold." And we can wear our hair down. Oh, it's going to be curled around our ears and stopped with ribbon, and the wild hunger of Jim Crow can't find you in church. So you scooting around the kitchen in your pretty white shoes without a single scuff, and your sister gets to dab a little rouge on her cheeks, but just on Sundays. Just on Sundays. And the car ride is a sovereign, floating joy, because your mama can sing. And she's rolling that pretty bell tinkle soprano out, and you picking up the chorus where you can. And though you have to keep tugging at your slip so that it does not dip below your dress, you are still everything new and shiny that God has ever loved. And deep and high in your sometime colored girl loveliness, because Jim Crow does not seek you in church. I don't know what came down first, but when that choir was singing, "I wish I knew how it would feel to be free," and you were a wet giggle with your sister in Sunday school, the sky came down, and it smothered everything. Ceiling tiles flew like occasional birds, smacked the walls and smoldered. Skulls and incandescent smoke. It's a wild death for a young girl. A valley of broken jawbone, baby teeth scattered like confetti. A stony, vexing sleep. That sun was crazy with shining anyway. Refugee clergy digging through the rubble, finding tiny limbs, and the world was a singed skirt. I don't know what came down first, but it all came down, didn't it, Addie and Denise? Didn't it, Cynthia? Didn't it, Carol? Didn't it drop winter in? Didn't it catch and keep the sky snatched low by the terrible clang of dynamite? Nobody should offer you a heaven when you hadn't even had your period yet, or been to your first dance, or had the chance to gossip about it the next day, and nobody can refresh your bones. Your mama will never be the sister who can smile with all her teeth because somebody lifted a sheet, and underneath it was your bomb-blasted body, and the world broke open, and it swallowed her whole. Things fall apart. The center will not hold, but do you hear that? Just over all that ugly, do you hear that? Past the thundercrack of grief and go down Moses, do you hear that? Can't no homemade detonated nothing touch it. Just down the street, there is still rough and tumble tag and tea parties. Some little girl is still lemon cookie, hula hoop, and hopscotch wonderful, twirling around in her mama's old stitched and restitched skirts, and she's gonna go to church on Sunday singing, "I wish I knew how it would feel to be free," and she'll mean it.
Doing all right? Yeah? This next poem I wrote for Michael Sam, who is the first openly gay NFL football player. And when I saw his name on ESPN kind of across the screen, it got me thinking about the weight of being a first. Does that make sense? Like Jackie Robinson, Michael Sam, and so many other names, the first to kind of break some kind of barrier. And I thought about the risk that involves, and the kind of, I would imagine, and in my experience, the kind of, I guess, peace that you have to have with yourself and knowing whatever will come will come. And I also was really interested and intrigued with how they were describing him and this kind of historic event. And what I noticed was that while they were celebrating him coming out as this first, they were also still using language to justify his manhood. And I thought those two things were really interesting to me and problematic for many reasons. But this is for Michael Sam and for being a first. To be the first, to split the skin wide open, to open your chest, to let it spill out all over the field, to summon the choir, to say, today is the day we make beautiful music, to say amen, to hold your truth so high can't nobody touch it, to own your own magic so deep you scatter it on the front lawn and say, yes, I am your neighbor too. To be the first means to see the crows coming, their mouths silly with hunger. They want to feast. They whisper faggot behind your back. They want to treat your body like a burning building. They want to believe they're not the ones in need of saving. Every judgmental eye is glistening, but you're learning how to turn your spine into a sharp shooter. You are learning how to survive being a bigger target. You can't back down now. You found your truth and it haunts you with its come get me, with its I've been waiting my whole life to say you out loud, alive and all over. Every day you disobey it is another step further from learning how to breathe, how to be. Every day you go unsaid is another day you tamper with the heaven in your hands. See, I grew up believing that I was broken. I didn't like the boy, thought I couldn't like the girl. I prayed that one day God would press the reset button until I held a woman so close I thought I would break loose, until every muted bird in me became an open church singing amen, until I realized I wasn't such a terrible thing, until I found a woman who would love me out loud and in public and for always. See, sometimes freedom is a contact sport. The mud gets up and into things, draws blood, grabs you when nobody's watching and says, are you angry enough to finally admit that we go together? Says, they can't call you faggot and leave with all their teeth. Says, I am your grandmother's backbone calling you home. Says, silence is a slow suicide. Says, you are your only way out. This isn't about you, Michael. You are proof that forests dance best when everyone can see them. This isn't about you. This is about reckoning with a beast so deep inside themselves they don't know what else to call it but by your name. Sports writers will focus on how much of a man you still are, how hard you still tackle, how masculine you still dress. Remind people that you're 6'3" and 260, big enough to fit a real man inside. Your teammates will come to your side and defend your character, and they will say, he's still a good guy. And it will feel like an exercise in inventing new euphemisms, yet and still and even though and in spite of and despite will not point your boyfriend out in the stands on national television, will not make jokes about you having to ask him for advice before football games, will turn conversations from girls to those about the weather and football plays, and they will say, he's still one of us. They'll throw their arm around your shoulder. They'll claim a wild victory. They'll call it allyship. But the room will be quieter and full with a new kind of silence born after the earth shook from your wonderful mouth.
Okay, I got the signal from the people in the back of the stage. It was kind of like, wrap it up, B. So I'm gonna read a short poem, and then we're gonna read our group poem and get out of here. Is that fair? Okay, good. I'm glad you agree, because I was gonna do that anyway. All right. I tell her about Jasper, Texas. It's like this, I say. There's a road in Jasper, Texas that dreamed it was a wolf. It practiced a wild hunger. It waited on an offering, sees James Bird and sharpens its teeth. The white boys feed the road. They laugh and spill their beer. Foam sits in their whiskers, puddles under their feet, and the asphalt drinks what it can. Becomes the spine bone circus, the tailbone scrape, the razored elbow, the ripping skin, whatever was pink inside, whatever thrummed, whatever pulsed got a good dragging. Miles and miles of bone meal. The road was a wolf. It knew it had been. The white boys bayed at the dawn limp moon. James Bird can't hush the burning. He's pulled behind the pickup truck, chains biting ankle bone to shrapnel. He's trying to latch his chin to his chest. He can hear his daddy tell him, "Keep your head, man, keep your head." And he's trying. The white boys don't stop the bloodletting. It is their favorite kind of music, a ticker tape of soft tissue. They hit a culvert, the steel pipe crescendo, and the all-over heat went out. The road licked the severed limbs clean, the blood-bone ritual of unholy. The white boys bayed at the moon. They laughed and spilled their beer. Foam settled in their whiskers. They say this is how you talk politics in Texas. A chain, a black boy, a bludgeoning. Take a deep breath. It's okay. It's okay. This next and last poem is our home poem. It's born out of a writing exercise that asks you to draw a roadmap to the places that you grew up, places that hold memory for you, a precedent-setting memory for you, right? And we're constantly in conversation about how there's so many more poems that we could write with that same writing exercise, right? So you want to talk about places that held a first. That's where I, rode my bike for the first time without training wheels,
That's where I had my first fight. It could be
And
anything.
2954 Claremont Street, Denver, Colorado, 80207.
No.
About 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Her name was Tanisha Campbell.
You just gave the government.
She had on a yellow sundress.
Stop. Please.
Cornrows.
Stop.
Beads at the end.
We get it.
She was trying me, see? I said, okay, Tanisha, I'm going to meet you at 2 o'clock. It's fine. We're Facebook friends now. Here we go. She
said
started
2
it.
o'clock.
2 o'clock. That's when you scheduled, scheduled them butt whoopings. 2 o'clock. Me and you. Black top. Okay? All right. I missed that. You couldn't get anywhere in my neighborhood without walking by Granny Pfeiffer's house. Mm-hmm. A coral peeling weathered flat that looked like dessert cake. And white frosting awnings sugared in decay, and them crabapple trees that spilled them fat bitter bulbs on the lawn that she religiously watered once in the morning and again at dusk, shuffling out the house in pink sponge rollers and corduroy house shoes made for a man with the heel pressed down and flat. Still, she would sit up straight, white lace glove, yes ma'am, delicious.
You couldn't move anywhere around my house without greeting all the old Spanish ladies
Hola.
your mama had
¿Qué estás
congregated in the
haciendo?
living room.
All right.
And no one ever made appointments. These women were too close for those kinds of commitments, dressed in their floral nightgowns.
Sábado Gigante.
was
Oh, yeah.
an evening ritual, the background music to women whose business it was to be in other people's business. Only pausing their Ave Marias
No me diga eso.
to sip their cafecitos. In this house, women sat close enough to touch each other's knees, made sancocho out of laughter. See, they knew how necessary it was to fill a space and how often they'd been drowned by their own silence.
If you wanted to get to the corner store in my neighborhood, you had to go by my friends Binky and Bunky's house.
Real names.
Real names. It was their real name. A red brick ranch-style home that kept its secrets pushed behind painted and repainted white screen door with that inevitable beehive stuck just above it. Everything about that house had a sting. But all fried, everything, all the time, everything. Oxtails, chicken legs, peppered and salted just right till your lips smack wetly to walk by, except you ain't never just walked by.
Oh, can I get a plate?
No, you stopped in. You set your shoes by the door. You listened for the rumble, said yes please to sweet potato pie, and maybe got your hair pressed out if Miss Susie felt like climbing in to tackle the bramble and quiet your brush fire locks.
In this house, I learned how wide a family can be, how it can wrap its arms around your waist in the tin foil of hot empanadas Irma dropped down from the 18th floor, how all these women were my abuelas and tias, how they gave me bendición. These were the I wish you would women, the I'm gonna be as loud as I wanna be women, the you look bien gorda women, the you look bien flaquita women. There ain't nothing good enough for these women. Women whose hearts were big and whose hands were rough, whose kitchen counters clean and mouths dirty when they needed to be. Here, you learned about the community that women can hold for one another and how a living room can become a bridge.
All right, now if you wanted to get to the playground in my neighborhood, you had to go by Richard's house.
Dang.
All right, it's a dude with no conscience.
No.
And no intention of coming into one. His mama was a Sunday school teacher, you know,
For
the irony. He didn't have a daddy. All the worst boys in Park Hill didn't seem to have a daddy, just dirty words and hands. Now, you couldn't get anywhere on Saturday morning in my neighborhood at all. I'm going to talk about it. Unless you hid from Jehovah's Witnesses.
You're gonna talk about it.
Because they were coming early.
Early.
Very early. Too early in the morning. These sisters in pastels peddling redemption with no real roadmap because it meant I wasn't going to get to cuss the way I need to.
She liked to cuss.
So, you do what any normal person does when they knock on the door early in the morning. You hide behind the couch. Wait for them to leave and go over to the next door house and not get in there either. They never did seem to get in, and maybe that's why it took God so long to find you, because you were ducking and running from everything, even yourself. But it was going to take you years to know that.
If you wanted to have your first kiss, you picked a boy with the soft hands. Used your 16th birthday as an excuse so your friends would stop teasing you about being a late bloomer and to prove to yourself that you weren't broken after all. But you were still the same girl before as you were after. Your mouth, no tree house for boys to find themselves in, but you kept trying, figuring one day you might start working. When you gave in to what you really wanted, you opened up your lips wider than you ever thought possible and tilted your neck toward the heaven of your best friend's mouth. And all the music started to settle into their bones because this, in fact, was your first kiss. The one your mama talked to you about. The one that missed all the pixie dust but kept all the magic.
Listen, if you wanted to have your first kiss in my neighborhood, you just did it.
You're nasty.
In the alley behind that one fast girl's house whose mama smoked Camels and was never home to catch her kids doing nothing.
She wasn't there. She wasn't there.
Oh, you leaned hard. You leaned into your galloping want, and then you waited. You waited for a messy exchange that sent saliva down your jawbone. But you wore eyeliner after that.
Yes, you did, Freca.
Thought you knew what a woman was and thought you knew you wanted to be one. Back alleys are not the right places for that kind of clarity.
No, probably not.
But you held on to it because that's what you do.
When there's nothing else to hold.
When there's nowhere else to go. When the place you are is the only thing telling you what you will become, you hold on to it.
You hold on to it.
And you call it home. Thank you
Thank
guys
you so much for having us.
And now, in continuation of honoring Dr. Martin Luther King, we want to take the time to recognize the wonderful work completed this past Saturday as part of the MLK Day of Service. Several hundred students, faculty, and staff volunteered their time at 6 sites in the community. And now to help acknowledge the work, we welcome students from our Bonner leaders from the Honors College and Metropolitan Volunteer Program.
Thank you, Sister Outsider Poetry, for that phenomenal performance. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here and giving us the opportunity to honor a man who lived what he preached. My name is Brenda Pinmetza, and I'm a freshman business major in the Bonner Leaders Program. The Bonner Program is a 4-year leadership program whose main work centers around poverty alleviation. Currently, we are 50 strong, and our students contribute 10 hours of meaningful service each week totaling to more than 13,000 hours per year. In the audience today are our outstanding directors, Honors College Associate Dean Dr. Andrew Hamilton, and Professor of Political Science, Allison Leland, who have worked very hard to make our program a success. This past Saturday, we gathered with the entire UH community to celebrate Dr. King's dedication to equality, justice, and love through a school-wide day of service at 7 locations in the 3rd Ward and Houston locations. We collaborated in this work with the Office of Governmental and Community Relations, the Metropolitan Volunteer Program, the Center for Student Involvement, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, and the Baptist Student Ministry. Though it is only in its 2nd year, the Bonner program has allowed sophomores Grace Schwartz and Caitlin Palavitas to lead projects such as this monumental day of service. Community partners included the Houston Food Bank, Forge for Families, Generation 1, the Houston Public Library, and the Houston Food Bank. We painted walls, washed windows, and reorganized spaces, all with the help of hundreds of staff, faculty, and alumni and students. As Regent Hollingsworth mentioned, Dr. King once said, "Greatness is determined by service." Our goal is to see the University of Houston become Tier 1 in service as well as research and education. We are keeping the dream alive. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at next year's Day of Service event. Now, Lydia Liu, my friend and fellow Bonner, will comment on her experience.
Thank you, Brenda. Hello, my name is Lydia Liu. I'm a member of the inaugural Bonner class and a hotel restaurant management major. As Bonners, we aspire to individually realize King's vision of the beloved community within our city. We're charting new educational programs for middle school students in the 3rd Ward, mentoring programs for high school students at Cesar Chavez, and launching a residential hall recycling program right here on campus. Our motivation is simple. We want to challenge each other to live outside of ourselves and develop empathy for others. On Saturday, I had the privilege of being a site leader at Forge for Families, a neighborhood Christian community center that is holistically addressing the needs of our community through children's programming, practical parent training, premarital and marital counseling, and economic development. We mulched their playground, deep cleaned their classroom facilities and kitchen area, and painted their interior spaces. We were able to support the Forge by fixing and cleaning their facilities so that they can better serve our community. The smiles and sincere thank yous that we received from the day of service just reaffirmed what Dr. King knew all along, that giving is so much more rewarding than receiving. And that service unifies like nothing else. Everyone, students, faculty, staff, alum, and even President Couture worked tirelessly to make the Forge almost as good as new. My fellow Bonner and co-chair Grace Schwartz envisioned the Day of Service as a student-led initiative that would reconnect fellow Cougs with our neighborhood. President Couture has said that great communities are built by great universities, and great universities are built by great communities. This Day of Service powerfully demonstrates that students are in full support of her vision. This year we had hundreds. Next year we hope for thousands. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I would like to thank you all for inviting us here today. My name is Tiara Parks. I'm a junior here at the University of Houston, and I'm also the director of the Metropolitan Volunteer Program. Now, the Metropolitan Volunteer Program was a student-led organization that was founded here at the university 26 years ago. Our mission is to create and provide service opportunities for students by collaborating with on-campus and community partners. Through this, we aim to develop responsible citizens that will create a lifelong commitment to service while also creating a sustainable change in our campus and in the community. As Brenda and Lydia mentioned earlier, this past Saturday, we, along with numerous other campus departments, provided students with a very successful MLK Day of Service. I also had the honor of being a site leader at Generation 1 Academy. This is also a ministry in the 3rd Ward, which provides tutoring services, neighborhood cleanups, and also paints houses in the various community neighborhoods there. Our project was to help clear 4 lots in the 3rd Ward community. Clearing lots is not only hard work. We had lawn mowing, weed mulching, and trash pickups, but it's also important. It makes a lot safe and beautiful for the neighborhoods in the community. Again, as Lydia mentioned earlier, the goal of this day of service is to create a positive relationship between the students, community service, and the Third Ward community. One volunteer that was at our site was a transfer student. He signed up to participate without even knowing what the words community service meant. After the day of service, he approached me to let me know that the Third Ward really wasn't as bad as the rumors that he had heard upon coming to the campus. He also wanted to know of other community service opportunities that the university had. And looking at our assessments, many of the other participants felt the same way. Our hope is that more students will get to know our university's neighbors and also be actively involved in our Houston community. So thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This concludes our program. Please join us for light refreshments right outside the hall. Thank you for coming today.